Good day, dear students. Today we are starting two poems by a renowned poet, and that is our own Tagore. And we are proud to have him as our poet because he is one person who is well known throughout the world, not just in India. So if there is an Indian writing in English, then the first name that is coming forth is that of Rabindranath Tagore. Born as a Bengali, he moved over in thoughts and in his teachings and in his writing beyond India, beyond nationalism, to a world where people will be regarded as people, not as Indians or Bengalis or even people from America, things like that. Those borders are not for him because he thinks that humanity as such is more important than the borders that bind us or limit us to certain norms. He is also one person who is behind the literature of our freedom struggle, and even before that also he was a well-known writer in Bengali, and later you will find that the poems were translated to English, and this opened up doors to Indian writing for the people all over the world. So we'll find that two poems are here for you to study. One poem is from a collection called The Gardener, and the other poem is from Gitanjali. You have heard of Gitanjali because this is one collection of poems which brought the Nobel Prize for Literature, and Tagore is a person who had put in these songs, Gitams or songs, and it is offered, he offered it to the world. The world accepted it. The main thing about these two collections is that both were published in 1913, but The Gardener was written several years ago, and from The Gardener to Gitanjali the progress is indeed something that is to be noted. So we'll start with the poem from the collection Gitanjali, and then we'll move over to the collection, the poem from the collection The Gardener. So he dedicated the poem, the book, to W.B. Yeats, and you will find that he was the verses were translated by Tagore himself from Gitanjali verse 35, and there is no title for it, but the first line reads like this: where the mind is without fear. And you have the second poem from the collection called Gardener. It is verse 46, which is you left me, that is line starting with you left me. So here you have two poems to study from two different collections, and this shows the progress of the poet from one aspect of life to another aspect. So you will find that Tagore had contributed much to the development of the nation. Even though he was not in the forefront of fighting with the English arm to arm, he did his level best through literature because he knew that a lot of people will be reading what he is writing. So he wrote in Bengali, which inspired the Bengalis, and later on it was translated to other languages, and people also started reading Tagore in English and other languages. And what he wrote was really good. Really good in the sense that he was speaking about an India which will be able to have a unity of its own. Of course, we were fighting against the colonial rule, but there are a lot of things that we have to consider when we become an independent nation. So Tagore, through his literature, contributed much to the development of our nation. And the one factor that he insisted on through his literature is that India should be an India of equality. Equality in the sense that people must be equals. And why equality? Because India at that time, and even for a long time after independence also, people in India, there was total inequality based on the religious denominations, and so the caste system was too much. And there is also the practices like sati, the self-immolation of a widow at the funeral pyre of her husband, and this is considered to be something great by the people. But you will find that there were a lot of institutions like Arya Samaj and Brahma Samaj coming up, and some of them were indeed doing a lot of work among the Hindus to abolish these practices like caste system and also this practice of sati. They succeeded to a great extent. So we can say that the literature of Tagore had its impact on the people of India before independence and also after independence. So the leaders of the independence struggle, they looked upon Tagore as their leader, and his poems and his words inspired them. So when he spoke of India of equality, where people will be equals, where there will be no barriers of caste and creed, it was taken up by the leaders of the independence struggle. And of course it was spread to the other states, the different states of India, and from the north to the south, its echo could be heard. Because you will find that even in our own little Kerala also there was its impact. And taking cue from these national leaders, we also started fighting against caste system, and we were successful to a great extent. And later you will find there were a lot of social inequalities that the people of Kerala and people of India were fighting against, inspired by the verses of Tagore. And so he was the Acharya of India, of independent India, and he had established an institution called a university, where you will find that it is where the differentiation between the teachers and the students do not exist. So if they want to take class, then they can have the class beneath a tree. And Shantiniketan, the university, where you find that you can learn arts and instruments and music, that was not the norm of a university in those days. He put in. Nowadays we have so many institutions like that, where you have dances and music being taught, and you get a certificate in music, and you get a certificate in different genre of dance and things like that. But in those days it was not the done thing, and Shantiniketan was the one of its kind. And this man, that is, we can't call him a man, just a man, he is an Acharya, and he was instrumental in bringing it to the completion, and he also taught there. So as Tagore was one person who was interested in music, he was a poet, he was also a novelist. He tried his hand in writing plays, but the thing is that those plays were, or those dramas were closet dramas. Closet dramas in the sense that they can you can read it and enjoy it, but the performance on the stage will not be that effective, because there was not much much dramaticality there. So here you find that the verses that he had composed, it comprises of several volumes, and we are given a taste of it from Gitanjali and also from the Gardener. And when you come to Gitanjali, you will find that all the verses in Gitanjali are prayerful. But the thing is that The poet do not use the name of God from any religion. He addresses or he envisages God as a king or in so many forms, and calls him as father, and calls him in so many enduring terms. But the thing is that it is just prayers addressed to that Almighty, and so you do not find the use of any name of God from any religion. Even though he is a Hindu, he could have used the name of any of his deities, but the thing is that he believes in something more than religion. This is why Gitanjali is a great success. So you will not find the name of God of any religion in Gitanjali. If you read the poems, you will really enjoy those poems. Each poem is a prayer. Each poem makes you meditate. Each poem will make you think twice about your concept of your concept of religion, and also your relationship with your fellow human beings. This is how it is put. They are very short poems. Some of them are maybe 1 page or more than 1.5 page, but not much more than that. But even then, each one has got a depth. Each one is indeed a gem, and it is a prayer, and this will make you think more and more about God. So here you find the Anjali of Gidams or this Gitanjali. It is more attachment to human aspect, and it is this that makes Gitanjali a really attractive collection of poems. When you come to the verse 35, it's verses comprising of very few lines. Let me see, 2, 4, nearly 8 lines. So you can't really make it as a sonnet or a lyric or an ode or nothing, just poems, and it is just a prayer. As you will read the poem, you will understand what it is. Let me read the poem at in one stretch, and sometimes in some edition there is a title that is Heaven of Freedom, but actually there is no title. So the poet writes, where the mind is without fear and the head is held high, where knowledge is free, where the world has not been broken up into fragments by narrow domestic walls, where words come out from the depth of truth, where tireless striving stretches its arms towards perfection, where the clear stream of reason has not lost its way into the dreary desert sand of dead habit, where the mind is led forward by thee into ever-widening thought and action, into that heaven of freedom, my Father, let my country await. A beautiful poem, and he is beginning it with the words, where the mind is without fear and the head is held high, where knowledge is free, where the mind is without fear. When do you have lack of fear? Because when you have a mind without fear, when you need not be afraid of either the authorities or the people around you, and when you have a very clear mind, you have not done anything wrong, and your mind is pure, and if that is the condition, then there will be no fear, and you can hold your head high because you are proud to be a human being, proud to be not belonging to this caste or the other caste, but proud to be a human being, and because of that you can hold your head high. And where knowledge is free, you must believe that you must remember that in the 13s is a time when we didn't even have much schools in Kerala, and knowledge or learning was limited to a certain group of people, and it was limited, and not anyone and everyone can join or even have a learning or even acquire knowledge, because it was not taught and there were no place to teach them. And if you belong to a lower strata of society or even to a lower caste, then definitely this kind of learning or teaching or learning or gathering knowledge is out of question, because that was the condition of India at that time. Though we were fighting against the British, the British were ready to treat us equals at that time, but even then we had this feeling that we should remove them, or we should be free from colonization. Of course we should, because so many people, they were ignorant and they didn't have proper education, and this was exploited by the British. And it is not just exploiting that Tagore means, but when the mind is free of fear, when the head is held high, then in order to be like that, knowledge must be free. It should not be confined to only certain homes or even to certain groups. It should be free. Knowledge should be free. And where the world has not been broken up into fragments by narrow domestic wars, when the world is not broken up into fragments of narrow domestic walls, the domesticity of the nations or even the states or even the districts, borders, and you can't get outside of that border, is indeed something that is to be thought of. And so we had globalization after some time, removing the borders of the nations and having free trade and free economy. But you will find that its impact was tremendous on this world. But at the same time, it was also destructive regarding the culture of a certain group of people, in certain areas. So he was not thinking in terms of having globalization in the market sense. He was thinking or speaking more about the world which is not broken into fragments by narrow domestic walls, the walls which make you feel that you are secure there. You need not think of the people outside of this wall. It is that thought which should be removed, where words come out from the depth of truth. When you speak, your words should come from the depth of truth, not like the politicians, where they speak and they are so well versed in speaking that you tend to believe them, and they speak so fluently, so effectively, that we are indeed moving or even turning towards them, believing them. And most of them, their words do not come from the depth of truth. They speak because they want to hide truth. So here Tagore is speaking about the country where words should come out from the depth of truth. So here you will find that Tagore is speaking in verse 35 not just about a free India, free of colonial rule. He aims at more than that. Even if the English leaves the land, India has its own restrictions. As I told you earlier, the restrictions of the religion, caste and creed. Caste, creed means religion. So here the narrow domestic walls like nationalism, religion and culture, these cause fragmentariness. That is, this is making you into small fragments, and you don't want to go beyond that fragments, and those fragments are really making you so stingy and not having much to share with the other people. But you will find that you will have to live without fear, and to live without fear and to live with held high, you need to change the society, or change should be there from the society in order to keep its citizens, its people, hold their head high so that they can walk with a great pride and a great feeling that, and tell them tell the world that you are an Indian, and not belonging to certain sects or certain groups, but to India alone. And he also speaks of knowledge which should be free, not constrained by caste system or rich or poor disparity, and we should speak from the depth of truth. We all know that our words should be spoken from the depth of truth, and only sincere thoughts should be expressed through words. And if not, do not. So he is asking us not to be pretentious and to be very sincere in your thought and also in your words. And then he continues, where tireless striving stretches its arms towards perfection. Tireless striving, not striving, stretches its arms towards perfection. So here you find that he is asking us to try towards perfection. Perfecting what? Perfecting you as a human being, trying to be good, trying to be perfect, trying to be faultless. And in order to be that, you have to work really hard. And striving means really working hard in through its arms towards perfection. It is like a dancer trying several times to correct the steps and get it right. The arms, the legs, the eyes, the expression, everything should come in the proper way in order to be a perfect dance pose. And so like that, the tireless striving its arms stretches its arms towards perfection. This will take you towards perfection, where the clear stream of reason has not lost its way into the dreary desert of dead habit. The clear stream of reason. Most people really do have a clear thinking process, but when they start expressing them, they were even prohibited by the other people, saying that you can't say this, you can't do this, you can't say this in this manner, you have to consider this and that. So naturally that clear stream of thinking will be drying up in that person. So here he says, do not be satisfied by mediocrity, and tireless work towards perfection will always be the one that you should always crave for, and in all fields of work. And your reason should still be intact, and you should not let it dry up by dead habit. Dead habit is the desert sand that dries up the clear stream of reason. Reason is a very clear stream, and if all around it, next to it, it is a desert, the heat of the desert will dry up that clear stream of reason. So even if people have the clear stream of reason or the clear thinking attitude, even they will be discouraged by the desert sand of the people, the opinion of the people who do not have a clear stream of reasoning, or that reasoning aspect is absent in so many other people. They are being compared to the desert sand, and the heat of the desert sand will even dry up those people who have the clear stream of reason, because the intensity of heat of the desert is too much, and the stream alone will not be able to survive. It will go underground most often, and sometimes it will just disappear from there. So people lose their way in such a desert, because if there is no one to lead them the path, the clear stream of reason, then people tend to lose their way and will be dead within no time at all. So he emphasizes the necessity for people with clear reasoning aspect, reasoning power, and which he calls as clear stream of reason, to be there to lead the people and not be dried up, not let them be dried up by the desert sand, the people who do not have a clarity of vision. So people, if the whole world, if the whole nation do not is a desert, then people will lose their way in such a desert. So he says that where the mind is led forward by thee into ever widening thought and action, mind and thought led by thee, led by God, and ever widening thought, action to follow. That is, the into ever widening thought and action. That is, it's just not enough that you have great thoughts. These thoughts should be followed by action. You should put those thoughts into practice. Only then your thought will be accepted by the people, or people will see what idea you have, and so your action to put into practice your thought is that which will help your fellow men to see what you are doing and understand it and follow it if they really wish to do so. And maybe the action of establishing a university called Shantiniketan, where the ancient Gurukula Sampradaya or Gurukula practice of the teacher living in communion with the students and teaching them at all times. There is no strict time rule for them, and wherever they want. So whatever course of action that they want, the course that they want to take up, like music or even arts or even writing or poetry, whatever they want to, they will find a master there. And he was putting into practice the thought that was there in his mind, and that putting into action is that which made the other people look around and find this as something new and something really desirable, and which really helped a lot of people to follow. So he is asking for this kind of a mindset and thought led by God into ever widening thought and action. Into ever widening thought. Thought should not be narrow. It should have a vision, a real wide enough thought, and again that thought should be followed by action. Into such a country, let my country, into such a freedom, into that heaven of freedom, he says, my Father, let my country be a way. Into such a heaven of freedom, that if you follow all this, into this where there is no prejudice, no caste system, and where people are really happy and they are not bound by narrow-mindedness or even domestic walls, and all these are things which are things that he really crave for his country. And let my country be awake with your grace, with your help, O God, to that heaven of freedom, that where let my country be awake. The poet uses the term my Father to address God. To that heaven of freedom means he is not asking for freedom for India just like that. He is asking for a heaven of freedom, where the country will be free from the shackles of things that bind them and pull them back instead of forward. And he knows what these are. People also know, and the freedom struggle is going on, and maybe they will get freedom. He had no idea whether the country will get freedom. It was written in 1913, before independence. But even then, you will find that Tagore had an idea of the country. It should be a heaven of freedom. And in that heaven of freedom, where there is freedom of thought, freedom of mind, and the right to education, and the right to speak, and the right to hold your head high, and the knowledge is free, and it is not words should come from the depth of truth. All these are that things which can really make a country a heaven. And it is such a country that he envisages, and it is a country of free country, and that freedom is not freedom and license to do whatever you like, but it should be a heaven where you will be treating your fellow countrymen as equals, not as one person belonging to another caste or creed or even another group. So the poet uses several terms to address God, and one such term is my father, and he addresses this his God as my father, because he knows that only God can lead the country through the proper path, and it is a prayer for the country. And as I told you, it is more spiritual, and these poems are indeed poems that comes from the heart of the poet. It's not just written, penned just for the sake of penning it. It is just a heartfelt prayer, and it is that prayer that makes that he has for the country when it gets freedom. Of course, he wants freedom for our country, and let it be a heaven of freedom, and let my country be a way to the removing to a heaven of freedom, where you will not find any barriers of caste, there will not be any barriers of rich and poor, and knowledge will be free, and people will be able to walk with the head held high, not move away when the person from higher caste comes. The lower caste people were expected to move and take a deviating path. That was the condition in our country in 1913, and so he knows what it is. Even though he was living in a comfortable house and he has got access to a lot of things, he is quite aware of the condition of the country, and the way he could bring about a change is through his words. This is why his literature becomes so very inspiring to the freedom fighters, to the leaders, and in a way to all the people. Not just freedom from colonialism, he is asking for an overall freedom, a freedom of mind, body, thoughts, and deeds. And in a way, Tagore is visualizing far ahead of any politician, any freedom struggling leader, and he is more philosopher and more spiritual than anyone else. So in a way, the leaders were fighting for freedom. They have to do whatever they have to, because it is only by fighting they are going to get freedom. And the method that Mahatma Gandhi uses is indeed ahimsa, which was criticized by a lot of people in India, and they knew that this is just something that is to be said and not practical. But to their surprise, to their immense surprise, and to the great pride of our country, we can say that his weapon won. The weapon of ahimsa really won freedom for us. And Tagore was a person who had a lot of things to write about his country, and all that he had written envisaged for his country was practiced by Mahatma Gandhi. And we can say that there is indeed one to inspire and one for action, and that is a great combination. And so when our country became free, the leaders in the forefront, they were trying to bring about a change. Gandhiji inspired them, and if you check the writings of that time, you will find that most of the writers were fighting or writing about the caste system and how it should be eradicated, and the rules must come, and it should be removed from the society, and so on. And this is how our constitution was drafted. So you will find that this is indeed something that Tagore had visualized several years before our independence day, or before India got independence. So what he had visualized is not just a free India as such. Of course, free India is necessary, but it should be a freedom of mind, body, thoughts, and should be followed by deeds also. It should not be limited to just paper or just words. And Tagore says that the words should come from the depth of your mind, and then it will be sincere. And so, more than a politician, Tagore is the one spiritual person who is inspiring the leaders of the freedom struggle, and they took their cue from him, and his words were accepted by the people, by the leaders. They tried to practice it in their lifetime, and to a great extent they were successful. And the leaders who came later on had to take up from there, and they can't just ignore the words of Tagore, because he had written it for the general public, not to any particular group of people alone, to almost all his countrymen, and also to the people of other places. If it is the prayer of Tagore, and let my country be away, because the name of the country is not there, we can conclude that it is not just for our country. If there is any other country fighting for freedom, if they start using these lines, then it is freedom for their country, and this is the type of freedom that they envisage for their country. So here you will find that Tagore is more philosopher. He is a writer, he is a poet, he is a novelist, a dramatist, everything, and he is into a lot of art, music and drama. Everything was there, and you will think that he lives in such a world surrounded by such things of beauty. But through his words we can understand that he is more philosopher, and his years of experience had made him more spiritual than any spiritual leader. You will find this when you finish reading Gitanjali, and I hope that you will get an occasion to read the poems of Gitanjali, which is really good and a very good collection, worth reading. And I must say that you must indeed read them. Only then you can transport yourself from the dreary drudgery of the day into a different level of spirituality, and this you can have by reading these poems. And how he reached this Gitanjali stage we can learn from the other collection, The Gardener. And so, dear friends and dear students, when we speak of Tagore, when he speaks of his country, mind you, it is not just about India alone, it's about the world. And so he is speaking, this prayer is for the people of the world, and especially maybe for his country, and that is very important. So when this prayer is recited, then we feel that it is for India. And Tagore also had visualized it, but even then he is not using his country or the term Bharat or India. He has this vision, and this vision can be copied to any other country also. So in a way, Tagore is visualizing a world free of hassle, free of mind, body, and the narrow walls of domesticity. Everything is moved, and let the people come and go. And why should they be restricted by so many things? And you should be able to think beyond that, beyond the walls. And it is that kind of a country which will be a heaven that Tagore prays for. And his prayer is indeed expressed through just eight lines of poetry, and they are beautiful lines, beautiful heartfelt words. As he says, the words should come from the mind, from the depth of the mind, and only then it will be sincere. And he speaks these lines from the depth of his mind. And so here, dear friends, you will find that it is indeed a time for people to think of so many aspects of India and India's freedom. And he was the one master, or the Acharya, who led the progress of the country starting from Bengal. And so there is a reason, because Tagore was there, he was much influential, and his family was also influential. But more than that, he was able to have a word with the people around him. And so many people from the India mainland went over to Bengal, and they started talking to Tagore and got inspiration from him. And Mahatma Gandhi and Nehru were freedom fighters. They were more practical, and Gandhi had his own idea of practicality and of freedom, and also how to achieve it. The weapon that he used was doubted by a lot of people, and we feel that so many people were fighting against the British, such a formidable army they have. So how can this man wearing wearing a single cloth can ever find freedom with his weapon of ahimsa? But Tagore didn't doubt him. So here you'll find that Tagore and Mahatma Gandhi had almost like-mindedness about their vision of India was almost the same, and Tagore expresses it in a prayer, and Gandhiji achieves it through his work. And he also writes about such a country, and he also puts in a lot of practical aspects regarding the country, and those are all necessary for the progress of the free India. Okay, because after the freedom, after colonization or the colonial rule ends, you will find that India had to recover from its aftermath. Recover, understand? Not just continue, but recover and then progress. And that needs a lot of working, hard work, plus making people understand, and also having to do with a lot of things like partition, death of Mahatma Gandhi, and the continuity from there. But in a way, this prayer of Tagore inspires a lot of people. Even now, when you read this poem, this is more like a prayer. It comes more like a prayer rather than a poem. It is both. This is why it is said Gitanjali is indeed a collection of spiritual verses rather than just a collection of poems. Of course, it is a collection of poems, but these are spiritual verses, and it's a very slim volume. And because he had not used the name of any god there, and that appealed to the people all over the world, and they were ready to accept it. Remember that it was published in 1913, and the world had gone through the First World War and the Second World War, and to them these poems were solace to them and comforting, and a lot of people used to read them and get comfort from that. So dear students, whenever you get time, just go through the poems of Gitanjali, enjoy them, and be comforted by those poems, because for a troubled mind, these poems will offer peace and a calmness and clear thinking too. So you will be able to move from there with a clear mind. So the next poem is The Gardener, and actually I started Gitanjali first because this is the second, or this is the last one, and Gardener is the first one, and we'll go to the first one after this because there is a reason. We'll discuss that in the next class. Till then, have a good time.